Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lieutenant Colonel Simone Reynolds. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bain, Australia's First World War official historian. Bain landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozieres, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bain's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bain's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Percy Henry Sieman. Percy Henry Sieman was born in 1886 to Gustav and Mary Sieman in St Peters, an inner west suburb of Sydney. Little is known about his childhood. He worked as a labourer in Sydney's western suburbs, and in 1913 he married Ruby Finney. The couple had 3 children, John, Alfred and Ruby. In March 1916, Sieman went to Sydney Showground at Moore Park to volunteer for service in the Australian Imperial Force. He undertook initial training in Australia before leaving Sydney on the transport ship Anchises in August. Arriving in England in October, he undertook further training there and joined his unit, the 36th Australian Infantry Battalion. With his light hair and fair complexion, Sieman was known to his comrades as Snowy. In November, the battalion was posted to France to join the fighting on the Western Front. Arriving at positions in northern France, the men trained and spent time in frontline trenches during the coldest winter in local memory. Even in late March, the battalion's war diary noted tersely, "Snow falling, cold, intense." In the first week after arriving in France, the 36th Battalion had been bombed by German aircraft and also undertaken training in the use of gas masks. Such was their introduction to the nature of modern warfare. In summer 1917, British commanders turned their attention north towards the Franco-Belgian border. The 36th Battalion had its first experience of battle in early June, when it was in reserve during the British capture of the town of Messines. During the march through Plegstert Wood to the front line, the men came under a heavy enemy artillery barrage of gas shells. The bombardment slowed the men's progress, but they struggled through it wearing gas masks, and most made it to their appointed positions on time. During the battle, Sieman was a runner, running messages to and from his company's captain. On the evening of the 10th of June 1917, the battalion was ordered to raid a system of German trenches known as La Poterie Farm. The raid began at 11 p.m, but while the Australians were forming up to attack, the Germans began shelling the Australian trenches. Sieman had just delivered a message to his company commander, Captain Piggott, when both men were struck by a shell and killed instantly. Snowy Sieman was 30 years old. Sieman was buried in Toronto Avenue Cemetery, a small cemetery in Belgium that contains the graves of 78 Australians who were killed during the First World War. His grieving widow, Ruby, chose the inscription for his headstone: "Someday, sometime, our eyes shall see thy face that lives in memory." He was survived in Australia by his widow and their 3 children, John, Alfred and Ruby. Private Percy Henry Sieman is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Percy Henry Sieman, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bain. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. That concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening. Thank you.